They're holding the ferry up. It's in the early morning now. They had the ferry running just to take me across the river. So when we get across the river, I really figured their intention was on killing me.
He's attempting to break up a fight. He puts his hand on this white man. He didn't punch this man. That's illegal?
The essence of the Southern system in those days was total control. It was a totalitarian nation.
Perez was making them do it. Perez made Landry file charges on me because they wanted to use me for example for the rest of the blacks.
It's been said of you that you have that you can grudgingly admire his blunt talk. He is honest about his bigotry.
I'm not a bigot at all.
Anytime white people would decide that what you were doing was improper, you could be arrested for it.
Perez built a jail on an alligator-infested island in the middle of the Mississippi River. Being arrested was one thing, but I didn't want to spend the night on that island. I was working with the law firm of Collins, Douglas, and Eli, which is the most important firm in civil rights law in Louisiana.
Gary Duncan, appellant, versus Louisiana. Mr. Sobol.
He didn't have no license to practice law in the state of Louisiana.
Suddenly, the forces of civil rights had allies.
Each time we lost a round of the case, Duncan was rearrested, put in prison overnight. It was all fixed.
How do you prove that this system is racist at its very core? Claude McKay wrote, "If we must die, let it not be like hogs pinned in an inglorious spot." In other words, we're going to fight like men.
I'm gonna die defending myself.
With you is that, you know, I've heard through the interwebs that this is a future project of yours.
That's right.
And, you know, Glenn and I are, you know, he's done this show a couple of times, but he came on recently we had an incredible, but with my occasional co-host, Ileana Douglas, who's an actor. I don't know if you know her.
Of course I do.
Okay. I assume maybe you did, but I didn't want to make any. Anyway, so she and I talked to Glenn. We had a wonderful conversation. So I will get that to you. So, you know, if you want
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. And, you know, I have to tell you, I'm so excited about that project.
Me too.
And, you know, it's so funny to be kind of, our film is just coming out and we're all very excited about that. And in the back of my mind is the new project too. It's like, I wish I could clone myself.
You've been on a streak, Nancy. And, you know, I talked to you for, the first time we met was regarding Sidney Lumet. So you're kind of toggling back to that. And then we talked, of course, about the rape of Reese Taylor. So it's exciting to, I love this ongoing relationship.
I do too, Adam. It's great to see you again. And by the way, this is probably something we should save for the interview if you feel like it, but I do feel like all these films are related.
Let's start there, please. Why so?
You know, I think that we're talking about people who are displaying moral courage, and I seem to be attracted to that. I mean, it's not unusual. Documentary films often do deal with that. I'm not unique, but so many people ask me, how is it that you go from these race-related films to films about the creative process or creative people? And I don't think it's just a question of switching up and looking for something different and fresh. I do feel like if you think about the Sidney Lumet story, what really came out in that story, it was really about his need to uplift people that stood up against corrupt forces, right? He didn't have the courage to do that do you remember in the film where he talks about that rape he witnessed in India, you know, when he was a soldier in the Second World War, when he was in the army?
Very vaguely, yeah.
I don't want to waste a lot of our time talking about that particular incident, but it's one of the things that motivated him and attracted him to stories about people who did stand up against corrupt forces, like Serpico or Prince of the City.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, he inserted himself, or he created a life around himself where he had to actively deal with these issues of the day. I mean, he was married to his mother-in-law was Lena Horne, correct?
That's yes.
Well, I just was watching. We will spend the crux of this time talking about Crime on the Bayou, but I just watched Yoruba Richan's unbelievable doc. It's so lovely. It's so great that I want your fans to also be aware of hers. It's on Amazon Prime.
I know Yoruba. She's a friend, and I agree with you. She's a terrific filmmaker.
Yeah, but it just reminded me of Lumet and.
If you remember, Lumet also talked about how his films didn't have a moral message, quote unquote.
Sure.
But if you travel through the films, and as we did in that movie, travel through his life, he finally kind of admits, yeah, it is true that I really care about what's fair. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what we're saying here too, that so many of the films that I'm dealing with deal with fairness. If we remove racism from the equation, it's still about right and wrong, still about what's fair. And it's still a look at people who have the courage to stand up and say, I am not going to take this. You know, I don't mean to be alluding to Network, but that, you know, Gary Duncan could have pleaded out his case. He could have taken a fine and he could have walked away and not have this on his record. End of story. But he didn't. He fought it. And he fortunately had, along with him, a very courageous young attorney that had just come in from DC to help him fight that case. Reese Taylor stands up and accuses her attackers the night of her gang rape in 1944 in Alabama. You know, she could have been killed and her family could have been attacked. But she stood up anyway to them. And Mildred Loving, after living in Washington, D.C. for I don't know how many years, can't stand it anymore and says, this is just wrong. Can't you do something about this? And she writes to Robert Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy enlists the ACLU, and the ACLU comes on board to help her fight her case. And we all know the history there. So, you know, I think that these are related, and that goes for Midnight Cowboy too. It's probably too soon for me to talk about the vision for that film, but I think that, you know, Glenn very beautifully brings out the fact that, you know, this film deals with some serious moral issues, and certainly deals with people who've been left aside by society. They're outcasts, and they discover that by tending to each other, by caring for each other, that's their salvation. So I don't know. I think, as I said, this is all to say that I think these are all very much related.
Well, you mentioned this Gary in his story where he was actually trying to do something positive and like, you know, got in trouble. He didn't stumble into an elevator or try to help some woman in a grocery store, but like those two other examples, he was merely trying to intervene in a fight among some kids, and, you know, brushed his hand against the white kid's arm, and then was accused of, you know, violence, and thus starts the legal battles that you were referring to, and then this, you know, Richard Sobol, comes from Washington. It's this Jewish white guy. And by the way, this is taking place in 1966. Was the brushing of the arm in 1966?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that all happens in 66.
We're talking about, what, 2 years after the Mississippi case where 3 kids come to college, kids, right? They go down. Dick Schwerner, Casey,
Andy Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney.
Right, and they go down.
And we allude to that in the film. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know.
It was dangerous for these lawyers. I guess that's the point you're getting to.
Exactly right. Yeah.
It was definitely dangerous for those lawyers to go down in the South. And if you remember, Armin Durfner in the movie talks about how when they travel, because he was in Mississippi working for LCDC. And so, you know, when he's traveling there, he said people always knew where I was. And if I didn't check in with them at a given time, they would come out and look for me. But he also makes this beautiful point that he said, I don't think what we did was so courageous because we could leave anytime. You know, it's the Black people there that can't leave and that are subject to these aggressions constantly on and on. You know, they are just walking down the street is a political act for a Black person. It was then and it is today.
Now, exactly. And by the way, it wasn't just the white racist or white pressure telling him not to pursue this. It was his family. I mean, why? His mom and his people around him must have been scared to death for him to be pushing back.
To correct you, it was his family that wanted him to pursue it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So let me rephrase.
Yeah, no, his mother was.
The families would never. I mean, but he did have a strong family behind him, right? That were.
You know, that's what's interesting about all three of these subjects. They all had the strength of their family behind them. They all had, you know, Reese Taylor's father was extremely supportive and strong, and same thing with Mildred Loving, her family.
Yeah.
So yeah, Gary Duncan's mother.
I didn't remember that. I apologize because.
But no problem. She was very supportive, and the father was a member of the NAACP. It may be another reason why Leander Perez chose to make an example of Gary Duncan.
Mm. How did you learn about this Gary's story, and how did you? I mean, he's completely involved.
Yes.
In the making of the film, he's you know, in the film today.
I read the proposal for a book that came out about a year ago called Deep Delta Justice by Matthew Van Meter, and it really tells the story. And I saw it in proposal form. The book hadn't been written yet. And I was taken by it for all the reasons that I explained before, all the ways that it connected to my other work, and, you know, just how powerful I thought it was. And then when I met Gary, I was totally sold because Gary wants the story told. He's a kind, wonderful human being, but still feels very strongly about right and wrong. And he was very cooperative and very emotionally engaged in telling us his story, which you can see in the film. And by the way, Matthew Van Meter has been a consultant on the film and introduced me to Gary Duncan and to Richard Sobol.
Right, and we will mention Richard Sobol was also, and then you also have this some wonderful archive of Richard, which the attorney, which I'm sure was very helpful considering. We'll just leave it at that. But so you have his involvement too. So it's great that you were able to make this just right in time. Everybody's getting older in that generation.
Yeah, it's a hard film to make, and it took a while, and we ended up finalizing the edit during COVID. So we did that remotely, but most of the edit was in place before. So I was able to sit, you know, shoulder to shoulder with my editor, which I love doing, Anthony Rapoli. He's terrific. And you know, we did, as I say, we did a lot of it as a team, and then we split up and did the rest of it remotely.
Right. I've talked to a lot of people that were in the same circumstances during the post phase of production. We also should mention that this case does go all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm not sure if you've mentioned that or not, but so this was a really dramatic case. It makes for a great riveting story. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the music here. You have some luminaries involved here in the making of the soundtrack.
I was very taken with the Chet Baker jazz that's in there and the Miles Davis. I'm not really sure why I felt so strongly about it. It has a kind of mournful feel to it. And I know that people would have expected me to use music directly from New Orleans, and you know, kind of more blues or soul type of music. And there was something about the cool jazz that spoke to the irony and frankly, the cynicism of the story. But it did have that kind of mournful quality that I found worked very well with the footage. It was kind of a juxtaposition. Instead of it fitting perfectly with the footage, it's just a little bit off. And that I think was interesting and effective. Was very grateful to Bob Dylan and Jeff Rosen, who allowed us to use Chimes of Freedom.
So shout out to what's his name? Bob what?
What's his name? Bob Dylan and Jeff Rosen, and Jeffrey Schulberg from Sony, who allowed us to use that song. You may have noticed under the credits, and I'd like to give a shout out to this song. This is it's original song by Raphael Sadiq.
Yes.
And it's called My Path. And when people watch the film now, it'll be the first time they will hear this. It's being released as a single on Friday, the 18th, the same day our film comes out.
Oh, nice.
And I encourage people to watch.
Yeah, we can get some Grammys or, some Oscars going.
Yeah.
These songs.
Well, I just think this song works so beautifully with the film. I mean,
right. You mentioned
the sentiment that we were going for, and I think it's a brilliant song, My Path.
Right. John Legend?
John Legend is an executive producer along with other members of Get Lifted, his company.
Okay.
And John Legend his company helped to arrange for Raphael Sadiq to do that song. So that's how it came together.
Yeah, and he's also, well, at least when I was there, he was on Sony. He was, I'm not sure if he was John Legend on Epic or Columbia? I can't remember. But yeah, no, it's terrific songs. It's called The Crime on the Bayou, and it's coming out. It's going to be in New York City and Los Angeles and select theaters nationwide this Friday, the 18th of June, directed by Nancy Buirski. I just urge everybody, it's such a timely story and an important story and a very entertaining documentary.
Thank you. Well, if they go on the site, the Shout Studios site, they'll see all the other cities where we're opening. We're going to be in 20 different locations.
Oh, very good. Right.
Yeah. So the folks at Falco can give you that information if you want to post it, but there is a link that allows you to see every city we'll be in.
Sure. No, I can manage that. And that's right. So I guess Shout, is it Shout Entertainment? So is it?
Shout Studios.
Shout Studios. Was that part of Shout Factory at one point?
Yes, it is. It still is. It's just
Sony was distributing some of their content too. So I'm seeing a trend here. I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
And also again on the next project, which I've got to figure out how I can be of help to you because I think I could be very, very helpful in this particular.
Stay in touch.
No, I totally will. But I'm going to also forward you. I think I might even have your email, so I'll forward you the link to that video of
please do.
With Glenn. I think it came out very nice.
Wonderful. Glenn has already been very helpful. He'll be a consultant on the film, and
this has been a big success for him. This book.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. And
I think he got a grant for his next project.
I'm Brian Epstein.
Right. Exactly. Which will be maybe your subsequent.
Adam, I also want to mention that if people want to learn more about A Crime on the Bayou, we do have a Facebook page,
okay,
Bayou, and a Twitter account.
And I'll share that on also here at the end. And I'll put the trailer at the beginning so people get a sense of the fun.
Good.
So yeah, that's one of the nice things about doing the video thing is I can do more stuff like that. It's nice.
Well,
it's Nancy, take care of it. I hope you're well.
It's a pleasure to visit with you again. I look forward to more.
Me too. Okay, take care.